Well, hello, welcome to episode 9 of Progress and Liberty. Going to talk about Bernie's campaign decisions here and his campaign in general. Been a lot of Bernie fans like Crystal Ball and Jimmy Dore and people that are turning on Bernie because he's endorsing Joe Biden, which was an obvious thing that he was going to do. Um, In terms of judging whether the campaign was a success or failure, I think a lot of these people judging it a failure, Kyle Kulinski, um, are kind of taking an interpretation of that a political neophyte might take, where they don't seem to understand that Bernie's campaign was an issue campaign. I mean, there's other people, TYT and Majority Report, they still don't like Biden, but they're not turning on Bernie. They might criticize Bernie in some ways, but this criticism of his campaign as a failure, I think, misunderstands what was going on. So I'll go through that in the following way. You can see on the slide maybe where, you know, what I'm going to be getting at. First of all, it was an issue campaign. It's a common progressive tactic. It's controversial whether it works or not. All sorts of things about how to run one if you do want to run one. You open yourself up to being a sellout by taking part in a system that you're protesting against, or because in debates and things you expose that maybe you're not a rebel in every single way. You're not just somebody's fantasy. Um, you have to decide whether to run soft or hard. Do you do a lot of negative campaigning? Do you be soft? Remember, it's an issue campaign. You're trying to get your issues on the table. There's no top limit to what you hope for. You hope to win, but even if you lose, you want to achieve putting your issues on the table, making friends, influencing people. Do you do that soft or hard? Those are just a traditional dichotomy you have to deal with. It's analogous, maybe the same thing as whether you be destructive or constructive. Are you in there just to throw a wrench into the system, break it because you think something else can grow up, or are you trying to be constructive and add the pieces? And I'm not saying one or the other is good. I'm saying it's controversial. Which approach would you take strategically? As a personal, emotional matter, like you're running, it's like, I got to be destructive. I think it's terrible. I want to throw a wrench in. Okay, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about in terms of us discussing how to run issue campaigns. It's hard to know, and it ends up being the campaign's choice of being more destructive or more constructive, how to bridge those two. And similarly, do you do it within the system or without the system? Are you on the outside prodding the system somehow, or in order to be able to engage more, robustly, are you quote unquote trying to be within the system? And these can just be impressions that people have, but it's how you're trying to run and brand and market your campaign. Now, Bernie's issue campaign, he decided to run it a certain way in 2016, and he ran it this way as well. Now, he expanded his campaign machinery in 2020 since he knew his issue campaign might actually also just be a good chance of winning campaign. He built out his organization to prepare for the chance that maybe he was going to win. In 2016, not so much. It was built just to put these issues on the table. And sure enough, in his issue, because he decided to play well with the Democratic Party, I'll get to that in that last point, but basically, by saying he would endorse and endorsing Hillary, even in 2016, post 2016, a lot of people thought on his side, not a lot, but some people thought, did the sellout thing. Why? Because he was playing with the system. He was soft. A lot of people saying it was a failure. It's like, oh, he was too soft. If he only would have been harder and had more negative ads before Super Tuesday. Right or wrong, still controversial, but Bernie ran his issue the more soft way with constructive criticism and forgiving. Now, some of that constructive criticism was accusations of corruption in not so many words, but in a nice way. And I like you. We just have a disagreement. You're making a mistake. You're not a bad person kind of a way. Just enough that I think it's fair to call it constructive criticism, but it built up a lot of animosity among, party standbys and longtime Democrats, both voters and people in the machine in the DNC. Um, I think it's fair to say it was constructive, but it made people think of destructive kinds of criticism enough that it made it hard for him to win, and he straddled that line in a way such that he didn't have to compromise on his issues, right? In order to say, hey, we need campaign finance reform, that we can't let billionaires buy the system, he couldn't abandon some rhetoric that sounded destructive, but in the end, constructive criticism. A softer approach, actually. Seems like a barn burner, like it's a hard approach, but that's just our weird frame of reference at the moment. And he ran it straddling also whether he was inside or outside of the party. Running as an independent, but having caucused with and cooperated with and compromised and worked with on lots of amendments and issues where he couldn't, his ideas didn't represent the majority, but he could still compromise and work with the party. It's an interesting thing. I mean, he could have also run as a Democrat all these years, but been a maverick, a liberal maverick or whatever, or it's just Democratic Socialist maverick or whatever he wanted to call himself. It's an alternate thing to say, no, I'm outside, but I want to work with you. It's a different way of doing the same thing. It's a different way of straddling your independence with your willingness to go in the party. And I think it's more honest in the sense that, if you're some sort of maverick, just admit you have your own ideas and, take advantage of the fact that you're willing to work with people without saying, hey, I'm on a team. You just don't even have to ask me. Of course, I'm going to vote with the team vote. But regardless, that's the way he ran it. He couldn't change that. If he'd changed it, then he would have compromised on ethics that other people were looking at, especially people that are used to the idea of an issue campaign where you go down with the ship. You're pushing the issues. You push those issues as far as they can. If you push them so far that your chance to become president is jeopardized, you're not supposed to abandon those issues and go, oh, here's where the wind's blowing, and jump with the wind. That's not what we want with an issue campaign. Even if the very same candidate might run both ways, flexible to what the people want so that he can get elected and do what's possible, or inflexible. The same person could be either way, but if you're in an issue campaign, you got to stick with those issues. And so that's what he did. And then you don't attack people because it's all about issues, right? So that's that. Bernie's campaign was a success. In my years of watching issue campaigns, it was a huge success. As a matter of fact, if Bernie's campaign wasn't here, one of the biggest issue campaign successes I've ever seen is Andrew Yang, who put all these things in the public conversation. Obviously didn't expect to be president, but would have been happy. You don't put an upper limit on your issue campaign, but generally you're going to undermine getting elected by pushing the issues, sticking with them, seeing how far they go. Don't change. You can change how you market that issue, but you can't change it so much that the issue itself has changed, right? And he amazingly got all this stuff out into the public consciousness on a national scale. Most issue candidacies you're seeing are local, or else they can't even get press. I had a friend that used to run for mayor of Berkeley and get 10, 15, 8, whatever percent, and it was to put the issues in there. And on a local thing, you can get in the paper some, maybe the rules will say you get to be in a debate and things like that. You have some, they might still try to limit you, or you are limited, as all campaigns are as well, but maybe more so. Still, you have a chance to put that out there, but to do it on a national level, it's pretty amazing, and it's a success. Even Andrew Yang's example is a way above average success of getting the issues out there. I'm not saying I agree with it. In fact, with Andrew Yang, I don't agree with his idea of a UBI. Really, I believe in some things that you might want to call UBI, I guess, but I don't really believe in a UBI, or what I think of as a UBI. To me, it's more of a safety net thing. You create minimums and stuff, but I don't see a reason to. I don't see how the UBI as such, as he's put it forward, works. You could possibly have a UBI like in Alaska, where you're getting a dividend off of property of a state that you're a citizen in and therefore a part owner. So there's ways to structure it, and I'm glad he's got it in the conversation. But I'm just saying, separate from agreeing with his issues, he got that issue in the conversation. He had other issues I wish also, that a lot of people had actually, that need to get in the conversation, that didn't, even though people ran on them, like statehood for Puerto Rico, very important. Bernie, on the other hand, has like four main issues, and he's drilled them into everybody's head, and to the point where they're going, well, he's just a one-trick pony, and it's not fresh. Yeah, it's not fresh. You memorized it. That was the actual goal. Becoming president and forcing people to memorize things is a complicated, possibly, perhaps impossible. As an issue campaign, very successful. It's for people that believe in those issues to carry them forward. And to a certain degree, people that are soft and willing to compromise with those issues but aren't like super supporters of them, it's for them to take advantage of the marketing that has been done for them and do however much they want to or feel they need to do for political reasons. And I expect to get some of that. I think it's clear Bernie endorsed Biden after getting some concessions from Biden. Now, what concessions can he really get from Biden? He can just make Biden adopt progressive policies, right? So Biden started doing that before, Bernie was talking to him, no doubt. Biden started doing that, Warren's policies. Then Biden says, Bernie, I need him to help lead and enact stuff, and we both believe in unions now. When they did the endorsement speech, he made these motions, no doubt they'd agreed on that. Now, we could get stabbed in the back. Now, to think this through, I just wanted to think in terms of a simple logic tree. So that's a series of yes or no questions that descend into possible states, and then you compare them, and you can get an idea of why or if Bernie's move here, now that he knew he was going to lose, by making an endorsement when he still had some influence, he could make Biden say he was going to adopt progressive policies, which he has. Now, he could still back out of them. So I have a yes and no about the adoption of progressive policies. Maybe this is temporary, and in the next 6 months, we're going to see him say, no, I'm going to run as a centrist. So we have, does Biden announce adoption of progressive policies? The yes is he runs progressive. No is he runs centrist, which is, of course, Biden's traditional career path. By the way, if we were going to have sort of a mainstream type candidate, Biden was at the bottom of the list of the ones I wanted. But the advantage to Biden is he's at the end of his career. He's of a generation that still has, and a type of politician that still has this idea of legacy. And he can be pressured. His idea of politics and political compromise means that there's going to be a team of people, and if he's letting the Bernie factions on the team, then that's actually quite promising when you look at how Democratic politics works. So, like Bernie managed to get an actual, not only the issues in the consciousness, but because of that, a seat at the table. Not necessarily directly for him, but for these kinds of ideas and positions. For Warren, for example. Okay, so if Biden does announce these adoption, which he has, and he sticks with it, does he win the election? Well, if yes, because we're saying if yes or if no, we're considering both possibilities, all the possibilities pyramided out. So if yes, then Biden is run as a progressive. He wins the election. Then we have an important question that basically the people that don't like Biden are thinking about. They're thinking this is going to be a no to this question of, does Biden enact progressive policies? Okay, well, if yes, then great. He enacted progressive policies, good. Bernie might have done more, but he's not the Congress, so he could have got pushback. We don't know if you do. This is a progress in the progressive direction. Now, if you wanted more with another candidate, well, that's what was already. Biden is winning. Biden won. We're just talking about what can Bernie do given that Biden has won that thing. Now, if he doesn't enact progressive policies, he doesn't keep the campaign promises he's already started to give, well, one, it's on him. It's not progressive's fault. It'll be clear that he betrayed, that he ran one way but then ruled another. Obama did that. And during the whole, ongoing situation, we can use his promises to pressure him, and he's open to pressure. Again, old school politics, one advantage. He's open to that kind of pressure, and so either one of those things, we either get progressive policies or we're in a situation to push for them. Whereas if Biden doesn't win the election, he runs progressive and loses, we're going to have anti-progressive policy because Trump's going to be president. The centrists will blame progressives, but they already do that. So the country would be worse off because Trump and a team of people that are just crazy and don't believe in science, they don't even just want to ignore science because it's profitable. They literally don't seem to believe in it. So that situation C is sort of more of the same for progressives, though. It doesn't hurt progressives' political position. Centrists will blame progressives, but we're already in that situation ever since, McGovern, Carter. Now, if Biden backs off of this and runs as a centrist, okay, what if he wins the election in that case? So yes, he runs as a centrist and wins the election. The Democratic Party will say they don't need us to win elections. That this would be one of the worst things for progressive policy. Now, it would be better than Trump winning, though, still. So don't forget that, right? We will get probably a little progressive policy, just to appease the party regulars that have some sympathy to, hey, if there's COVID, everybody needs some kind of backup universal health care at least, or whatever they do. And probably some anti-progressive policy because there's people like that in the party. And if they win while saying, fuck you, progressives, they're going to be happy to just leave progressives out, and they'll probably say they're at the table, and they might even let some progressives be on committees as if they're at the table, but they won't really let them take part. And I trust Bernie enough right now that he thinks we're at the table for now as far as what they say. What they do later, of course, is a re-up. Once there's an admin, then you see who's really, you can have policy advisors that aren't going to make it into the White House. I actually don't think Biden is in the state of mind to pull that particular kind of trick. I think he just wants to be president and make a coalition where he can accomplish some things that he can chalk up to his legacy. That's my numbering up of him. Now, if Biden runs as a centrist and loses the election, well, the centrists won't blame the centrists, but the progressives can. We'll get anti-progressive policy, and we'll just have to deal with that. And similar to if he loses and runs as a progressive, there'll be no joy to be had that Trump wins. And the centrists certainly will still blame progressives, not the policy because Biden won't have run on it, but they'll try to blame it on, again, that's just what they're going to do for probably a long time. In the end, I think if you add these up, you can see that, okay, Bernie did the best thing by putting out a situation where there's a concession to go ahead and pay lip service and put in your official policy some of these progressive ideas, not the whole thing, not Bernie's whole, platform, but to adopt a lot of the important parts of it and important principles is to put Biden on the spot. And given the circumstances, there's not really more that you could do. So I think Bernie's campaign is a success. I would have loved for it to go further, but I'm familiar with issue campaigns, and it went further than I expected when he started. I'm familiar with Bernie from years ago, and he used to be on Thom Hartmann all the time, and I wouldn't have guessed in 2014 that it was going to be as successful as this. So that's a success, and it's too bad that he couldn't go all the way to be the Democratic candidate, but that would have been astounding. And his effect on the regular Democratic Party establishment is exactly what we were going for. Those of us that were trying to work within the Democratic Party. I wouldn't say limited to within the Democratic Party, but we're part of a progressive faction, some of whom try to work in the Democratic Party, some of whom have given up on the Democratic Party, some of whom hate the Democratic Party, and basically all of whom are distrustful of the Democratic Party. And this is what the ones working within the Democratic Party have been trying to do, move and push it. And we will need to right now carry through by pushing these issues. These issues are well known. When you bring them up in the past, people are like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Now they know. We have a much better grip. We keep trying to move the party. It's not about being in the party and trapped in the party. Just you can go in the party and try to help move it from there. We have certain hold points where we can move from in there. Push it from outside as well. That's all good. And in the end, I mean, Trump is the worst. It's not hard to judge two evils or whatever, the lesser of two evils. Um, it's often quite easy. Sometimes the enemy of your enemy is also just a bigger enemy, right? So, I mean, Biden has been a big adversary of mine. I'm sure he doesn't know who I am, but I certainly feel like he's been on the other side of politics for me. And his enemy, Trump, is my worst enemy. So that's that. All right. Well, I'm glad this one went. I had a little trouble with the first part. I had to delay my release here. Um, all right. I see your comment, David. Yeah, it had. He says, I think Bernie's endorsement of Biden has damaged his reputation in the eyes of many. Yeah, so what? We're not sheep. Bernie can't sheepdog us. Yeah, Bernie's not a sheep either. He's telling you what he thinks. Well, I don't have to believe it. Yeah, Bernie knows you don't have to. You're not. You're a bunch of cats. Nobody expects I'm a bunch of cats. I'm one of the bunch. I mean, and uh, Bernie's being sincere. He's saying, look at the whole situation. And Bernie also knows that he didn't originally run thinking he would get as close to the presidency twice as he did. And it means that he launched those issues. People know about them. They're from a faction that he didn't create those issues or those numbers or anything. He took very moderate versions of ideas that exist among the progressive, activist, liberal faction. And whether it was luck or whether it was the way he ran his issue campaign, they're out there. It's probably for sure a combination, the timing and luck and all of that stuff. But he tried when it was the right time and he had the opportunity, and that part worked. We would have liked more, but if we would have got him as president and then watched him fail to get Medicare for all, we'd be going, oh, then it failed that way. Whatever. He got the issues out there. Now it'll be gone. We don't have to deal with the baggage of the animosity that party has for him, and certain people of his mindset, New Deal Democrats, have been re-injected into the party, possibly ending an era of my whole life where these baby boomer DLC, no offense boomers, DLC Democrats took over the party. All the New Deal Democrats faded out. Now we're having New Deal Democrats. And that's good. All right.